You're now turning your attention to the cerebellum, the little brain tucked beneath the cerebral hemispheres and posterior to the brainstem. Though it comprises only about 10% of total brain volume, it contains over 50% of all its neurons. Its primary role is to coordinate movement, maintain posture and balance, and fine-tune motor commands, while also contributing to motor learning and certain cognitive functions. Anatomically, the cerebellum is divided into 3 lobes on each side: the anterior lobe, posterior lobe, and flocculonodular lobe. These are separated by 2 deep fissures, the primary fissure between anterior and posterior lobes, and the posterolateral fissure between the posterior and flocculonodular lobes. Each cerebellar hemisphere wraps around a central structure called the vermis. The surface of the cerebellum shows tightly packed folia narrow, leaf-like gyri, giving it a distinctive ridged appearance. Underneath lies the white matter, branching like a tree and hence nicknamed the arbor vitae, surrounding the deep gray matter nuclei. There are 3 paired cerebellar deep nuclei embedded within the white matter, from medial to lateral the fastigial, interposed, globose and emboliform, and dentate nuclei. These act as the primary output stations of cerebellar processing. Functional divisions parallel this anatomical layout. The vestibulocerebellum comprises the flocculonodular lobe and adjacent vermis. It receives input from the vestibular system and projects to vestibular nuclei, regulating balance, eye movements, and posture. Lesions here produce truncal ataxia and nystagmus. The spinocerebellum includes the vermis and the intermediate zones of the hemispheres. It receives proprioceptive input from the spinal cord via the dorsal spinocerebellar and ventral spinocerebellar tracts, and from the trigeminal system for head and face proprioception. The vermal region influences axial musculature through the fastigial nucleus and medial descending pathways, maintaining posture. The intermediate zones connect via the interposed nuclei to lateral descending pathways, adjusting limb movements and tone. Lesions in this division cause gait ataxia, dysmetria, and decomposition of movement. The cerebrocerebellum corresponds to the lateral hemispheres and communicates extensively with the cerebral cortex via the pontine nuclei, dentate nucleus, and thalamus. It is involved in planning, timing, and execution of skilled, distal voluntary movements. It also participates in motor learning, adapting movements based on sensory feedback. Damage to this area leads to dysdiadochokinesia, intention tremor, and errors in movement timing. Cerebellar cortical circuitry is remarkably uniform. Input mossy fibers originating from spinal cord, vestibular nuclei, and pontine nuclei synapse onto granule cells. Granule cells give rise to parallel fibers, which run perpendicular to the long axis of Purkinje cell dendritic trees, creating a dense web of synaptic contacts. Climbing fibers, arising exclusively from the inferior olivary nucleus, wrap around Purkinje neuron dendrites, generating powerful modulatory inputs. Purkinje cells are the sole output neurons of the cerebellar cortex. They send inhibitory projections to the deep nuclei. The balance of excitatory mossy and climbing fiber inputs, combined with inhibitory Purkinje output, sculpts the timing and strength of cerebellar signals relayed by the deep nuclei to motor and premotor centers. Afferent pathways enter via the 3 cerebellar peduncles. The superior peduncle carries mostly efferent fibers from the deep nuclei to thalamus and red nucleus, along with some afferents from the spinal cord. The middle peduncle, the largest, conveys pontocerebellar fibers to the lateral hemispheres. The inferior peduncle brings in vestibular and spinal inputs and sends outputs to vestibular nuclei. Blood supply comes from 3 paired arteries, the superior cerebellar artery, anterior inferior cerebellar artery, and posterior inferior cerebellar artery. Infarcts in these territories produce characteristic cerebellar syndromes depending on the affected division. On a functional level, the cerebellum operates as an error correction machine. Sensory feedback about intended versus actual movement is continually compared, and corrective signals are sent to adjust motor commands in real time. This fine-tuning underlies smooth execution of complex movements, rapid learning of new motor skills, and adaptive responses to changing environments. Beyond motor control, the cerebellum contributes to cognitive processes, language sequencing, attention shifting, and emotional regulation via its connections with prefrontal and parietal cortices. Modern imaging and lesion studies reveal subtle deficits in planning, set shifting, and even affective disturbances after cerebellar damage, highlighting its broader integrative role. Understanding the cerebellum's functional anatomy from lobular divisions to microcircuitry reveals how it seamlessly integrates sensory inputs, refines motor plans, and supports learning, ensuring that every movement is coordinated, balanced, and precise.